This week, we are talking about how to steal like an artist, which is actually the title of a great book by Austin Kleon that you should absolutely check out. I'm coming at this topic a little bit differently than he did, but I think that a lot of the principles that he talks about in his book are fantastic, and you should definitely give it a read. Today, though, we want to talk about imitation and how imitation is not only the best form of flattery, but it's actually the best way to learn something. I don't know if you've spent any time around little kids, but if you have, then you've undoubtedly noticed that the way they learn is different from the way adults learn. It's sort of weird that throughout our life, we actually change the way we learn. But it's true, we do. And it's not for good reason either. Children have a very specific trick to learning things, and that's imitation. My daughter is currently 2 years old, about to turn 3, and she's reached the stage where she simply repeats everything she hears, which is fantastic and hilarious, except when it's not, and it's deeply embarrassing. But the truth is that she isn't trying to be funny or embarrass us. She's just trying to understand her world. And the best way to understand her world is through imitation. It's through repeating the phrases that she hears and the actions that she sees. Because by repeating them, she can understand the context of how they best fit into the world. Imitation is the fastest way to learn, not just for kids, but for anybody. You know, they have that saying that if you're trying to teach somebody how to do something, you should show them how to do it, and then you should have them do it with you, and then you should watch them do it, and then you should have them teach somebody else to do it. One of the key pieces there is the imitation. You do it first, and then they do it after you. And you progressively get more and more hands off as they are repeating the action over and over again. Because this is the other interesting thing. Not only does imitating other people allow us to learn faster, but imitating ourselves is the key to mastery. When we talk about repetition in any sort of skill acquisition, we're talking about imitating ourselves. We're not doing it exactly the same way each time. Instead, we're doing it with whatever our contextual understanding of that action is. So, if I'm trying to write a good character, and I write a couple of sentences, and I read back over them, and I think to myself, this is kind of falling flat. And I delete those sentences, and I start again, and I write again. I'm imitating my same action. I'm doing the same thing over again. I'm repeating the same work, but I'm not copying it perfectly. I think we have this idea that imitation is a perfect copy of something, probably brought to us by annoying siblings who, when you would say something, would just repeat it verbatim, leading to the often hilarious attempts to try to trick them into saying something stupid. Fun aside, there's something in our souls that hates exact replicas. We hate being copied because there's something false about those copies. And as a result, we don't like to imitate other people. There's another reason, though, that we don't like to imitate other people. And it's split into sort of what I'll call a internal and external reason. Internally, we don't like to copy or be copied because we want to stand out. We want to be unique. We want to be special. And that desire to be special, that pride, drives us to try to do things differently or to not imitate what other people do. And this comes from having grown up out of a childlike state and starting to develop an independent ego. And as we develop an independent ego, we think to ourselves, I should be different from everybody else. Because that difference is what forms my identity. And so that drives us to not copy anybody. We lose that ability to imitate other people. We lose that ability to imitate the actions we see in our surroundings, thereby decreasing the amount of learning that we can do. And then there's an external reason that we don't imitate as well, and that is because culturally, it's not appropriate. It is inappropriate for me to mimic the words that somebody says in a conversation. It's even inappropriate for me to take somebody's story and tell it as my own story. It's inappropriate for me to imitate somebody's walk or the way they dress or the way they talk. Part of that is because culturally, we're just becoming more sensitive to how that makes people feel. But there's another piece of it, which is that culturally, we value independence so incredibly highly. We value singleness, oneness, the singular unit above the group. And because of that, we are constantly driven to stand out and stand apart. And we are constantly told that standing out and standing apart is what we should be seeking. Whether that's actually true or not is not the scope of this video. We just want to understand why it is we do what we do. But it wasn't always like this. In the past, the best way to learn a new skill, a new trade, was to watch somebody who had done it for a long time and then repeat their actions. That's what the apprenticeship system was. You would go and you would apprentice to somebody who was a master at their craft, and then you would repeat their actions over and over and over again. But you wouldn't start by repeating, you would start by observing. You would watch them, and then once you had gotten to the point where your understanding of the context of their actions was high enough, you would start to take those actions as well. Now, we abandoned the apprenticeship system because it's incredibly inefficient from a scaling perspective. See, our population scaled incredibly fast, and the apprenticeship system just couldn't keep up because you can't have one master and a million apprentices. Instead, we ended up going with our current schooling system, which, doesn't work very well, but it is what it is. And so instead of having people imitate the actions of a master, we're now just telling them what to do and expecting them to sort of figure it out on their own. But the reality is that if you want to master something, the most efficient way is to spend time with somebody who has already mastered it and imitate their actions. One of the things that I run into all the time with new writers is this idea that people want to find their own voice. And there's nothing wrong with finding your own voice. The reality is that you don't even have to go look for it. Eventually, it will just come out. And so instead of wasting a ton of time trying to find your voice, what you would be better served doing is spending that time honing your craft by imitating people who are really, really good writers. If you can find people who are good writers and you can lift wholesale from them their method of constructing dialogue or the way they weave plots or the pacing of their novels, the atmosphere, their word choice, all of those pieces, if you can take those pieces that you love best that speak to you from masters, soon you'll find your own voice emerging because it's going to be an amalgamation of all of these other master level techniques. What you should be doing with your time is imitating as many people as you possibly can, because that is what's going to turn the words in your head into expert level prose. So the next time you think to yourself, ooh, I don't want to copy, push that thought out of your head. Put your butt in the seat and copy. Now, I'm not saying, and I want to be very clear about this, that you should then pass off that work as just your own. No, we need to acknowledge where we get ideas from. We need to acknowledge where the sources of our inspiration are. But I do think that if you want to become a fantastic writer, the best way you can do it is through imitation.